So in the meantime, I have an interesting poll for you guys. So I'm just launching the poll. I hope you guys can see it. So would love to know, where are you guys in your Gen AI journey? I know a lot of people have started putting things into production, but the numbers here are really interesting. Most of the people are live in production and even scaling across teams. That's very, very, very nice to hear. Amazing. Okay, so I still a few people who are voting. Okay, I'm ending the poll now so that you guys can see the results. So a lot of people, more than 50% of the people are live in production, and 15% people are even scaling across teams. That is very interesting to know. All right. So Anurag was just talking about a few house rules. Feel free to drop in your questions in the Q&A section or even the chat box. Our team is here. They'll pick up the questions, and we even have some time at the end of the session for some Q&As. We have very interesting giveaways for all the attendees of the webinar. So please stay tuned in. Yeah, and I see a few people are still joining in, but probably we are around 5 minutes past our starting time, so maybe we can start with a round of introductions first. So we have Nikunj, Abhishek, and Anurag, three of our co-founders here at True Foundry. Nikunj is the CEO of True Foundry. He's one of the co-founders. He worked at Meta before this, and he's from UC Berkeley. Abhishek, he's also a Meta veteran, worked at Meta for around 6-7 years. Saw scaled ML systems at Meta. That was the seed for True Foundry, in fact. And then Anurag is the CEO, comes from a very strong finance background where he used ML models to manage, I don't know how many billions of dollars. So, so we take over for the next 1 hour, and hopefully it'll be a very enjoyable session for you all. So over to you, Nikunj.
Thank you so much, Deepti. Um, Super excited to be talking about what to be sharing our learnings around a modern generative AI stack with our experience of working with a bunch of large enterprises and fast moving startups. And in today's session, we are going to focus on the evolution of a very specific component, which is LLM Gateway, that we have seen over the last few months. Like literally in the last 6 to 9 months, we have seen LLM Gateway to have evolved from a mere model routing layer, like a super thin model routing layer, to a critical central control panel, without which a modern GenAI stack literally seems impossible now. We are seeing how enterprises are using LLM Gateway to exercise central control across all the applications running within the enterprise. But before we dive into why Gateway is becoming such a important component of the stack, let's just go through a little bit about the journey of LLMs themselves. In the last 1 year, I think it's not a news to anyone anymore that LLM agents have become the norm of how any generative AI applications are being built, right? And the agents themselves have gotten to a point where they are goal oriented autonomous systems that can by themselves make use of different tools from the earlier prompt response generations that we were using LLMs for, right? For example, like back in 2023, this was already considered a success where if you wanted to give an instruction to the LLM. The LLM would respond with a certain response, a meaningful answer, and we were shocked by the capability of the LLMs from as next word generators. Now, if you look into 2025, besides being able to point you to how to solve your password reset problem, the LLMs can actually invoke different tools, look for the authentication rules set up for a certain user for a certain application, invoke the API with which they can reset the password for the user, and actually send out a confirmation email as well, right? So as you can see that in just solving this one simple problem of how do you reset your password, from it has evolved from a simple response to something that's calling multiple systems under the hood and generating confirmation emails. And this is just one simple agent. What's happening in the ecosystem is dozens of such and a lot more complex agents are being built by different teams within an organization, run at scale, using very frequently different models from different providers, leveraging different underlying frameworks with which they are actually building these applications, and often running on a completely different infrastructure stack, which could combine different hyperscalers, or in some other cases, also hybrid cloud with some of the on-prem GPUs as well. Now, while this kind of flexibility in your stack is great for development and federated execution, it is a nightmare for any organization to establish any notion, any semblance of centralized governance. And that's what is resulting into a lot of challenges that we see Gateway starting to solve for. So before we talk about the gateway itself, let's actually let it sink in about what are the type of challenges people are facing at scale. So there's a common notion in the industry that OpenAI compatible APIs have become the solution to switching across models. And to be honest, it will get that way in the stable in a stable state. But today we're nowhere close to that happy world. Like in this just one simple screenshot, you can see different model providers like OpenAI, Gemini, and Claude for three similar arguments that need to be passed require completely different syntax. So the max tokens syntax look different. The temperature range is actually different from different models. So let's say if you were to pass a temperature of 1.5, it would work with OpenAI but would crash with Gemini or Claude. Or the stop sequences sometimes are not even supported with some of these models, which makes it very difficult for developers to be able to interchangeably use these models. And by the way, the model providers themselves, while they have become giants, they are also startups that are just getting to some level of stability. Like we put together some screenshots in the last 3 months, and you can see how many outages have been with respect to a given model provider, which mandates users to build their applications in a model agnostic manner. But then some of the problems that I showed in the previous slide actually makes it difficult for you to interchangeably use these models, right? And effectively, it results in model downtime or in your application downtime itself because the model itself is going down. Not just the models going down, but sometimes if you see these graphs, they are actually the average latency for these models for a similar kind of request response. And if you look at this graph, it's extremely variable, which makes the latency of your own application unpredictable. And for again any serious applications, missing SLAs on latency can effectively be as bad as the application being down. On the other hand, again, because all of these model providers are still setting up the infrastructure and the way they are priced, people have to set up rate limits and throttle the number of requests going. For example, a developer generating some data set using these model providers in their dev environments might just be able to completely use all your provision throughput units. And as an organization, you want to save your PTUs for actual production applications. which means that the central platform team have to now enforce things like throttles for different tenants, for different models and user-based rate limits, and management of this is becoming a nightmare as well. Now put that in perspective that each model provider have these kind of rate limits that need to be enforced. And again, you're dealing with multiple providers from multiple different hyperscalers. And on top of that, you have these models running in-house as well on your own GPUs. So being able to put any kind of throttle and rate limits is challenging. But at the same time, if you think about in the context of a large enterprise, typically they have cost centers associated with different business units. And the way these applications are built and launched is you need to attribute the cost of a certain application to the cost center of that business unit. Now, you also need to do that across these model providers as well. And outside of this, we have also seen that a lot of your applications that are built with generative AI actually tend to very similar repeatable questions for many applications running at scale. Simple notion of semantic caching can lead to significant performance improvements because your latency would improve, your number of calls to the model would go down, and the cost of your application to go down. Here we have just put together like a toy example where if you simply said hi to a model, hundreds of millions or a billion times in a year, you're looking at $100,000 worth of cost spent just in the greeting itself. That said, before you're able to launch any application to production, you absolutely need to set up guardrails. Now, launching guardrails for one application that leverages one model might still be solvable by changing the prompts of that model. But what if you have all of these different model providers that you're working with being invoked by completely different business units and completely different groups of developers? How are you going to maintain a standard set of guardrails that you may want to enforce across the enterprise? And these guardrails are important at the input level, where you have to apply these guardrails at the prompt level, ensure maybe no PII leaves your VPC and goes to these model providers, or at the output level to ensure that, let's say, there is no profane response that you are launching it out to the end users of the application, right? So again, a central component is needed to enforce these guardrails. And last but not the least, think about governance. Like literally for the first time in the world, we are seeing not just a single application, but a single request within that application often is leveraging data from multiple sources and leveraging models that could be running on completely different cloud providers. In such a scenario, how do you ensure a certain level of audit control, audit logging, right? Where the logs of these systems should flow through a central control plane, which you can use to enforce any kind of rules, any kind of observability, any kind of explainability um, to like the government. Like if somebody asks you any question around how did you come up with a certain response, you need to be able to look into your audit logs and respond to something like that. And that system alone makes launching applications, production applications, which are safety critical, extremely challenging. All of these challenges are now being solved by the LLM Gateway layer, which is why it's becoming this central control plane that ensures reliability of your application, observability of your applications, governance of your application, and this common layer that controls the cost, rate limits for all the GenAI applications running within the enterprise. And that's the transformation from gateway being a simple thin model routing layer to this critical component in the stack. And how do you build and design this gateway? For that, I'm going to hand over the presentation to my co-founder and CTO, Abhishek.
Hi everyone, great to meet you today. I'll be going over how a gateway can solve over some of the problems that Nikun just mentioned. I'll share my screen.
Just one thing in between, folks, please keep on asking questions. Nikunj, if you can turn off the video from your side.
So in the meantime, I just have a poll, Abhishek, before we continue with the session. So how many LLMs are you currently using in your org? Are you still on OpenAI or using multiple models? Would also love to know if you're using only model providers, also self-hosting few of them. Feel free to drop your comments in the chat. Okay, so amazing. So I see most of you are using more than 5+ models. So all of you are using multiple models. I'll just end the poll and share the results and pass on to Abhishek.
Thanks,
Abhishek, yeah.
Yeah. So we look into how an AI gateway can solve some of the problems. So, yeah. So what an AI gateway kind of provides is a few functionalities that kind of alleviate some of the problems. So one of them is the unified API. I'll be talking into details about each of these functionalities. But basically, it's like a central layer that can sit inside your organization or company, and through which all LLM traffic can flow, which gives you a lot of flexibility in the future. Like apart from the unified API that it offers, it gives you a lot of auditability, governance, putting guardrails, fallbacks on a central level. So that's why it's very important that you kind of set this infrastructure up in the company so that in the future, if you have to, let's say, change accounts, change keys, anything like that, you don't have to go to every single application team to make those changes. So I'll go into one of these things. So unified API is basically one of the key things that a gateway provides, which is kind of important because if you don't do that, you kind of enter into a very strong vendor lock-in with the actual provider because the provider specific code starts entering your code base. And we all know once the code becomes vendor locked in, it's very, very difficult to change or replace later because that requires a code change, review process, testing process, all of that. So what the gateway kind of enables you is that you can literally have just a request API, and there you can just mention the name of the model and a standard API key that will work across all the models. So no matter if you're using AWS, GCP, Azure, you don't want to be tied up to their authentication methods because then again you'll require a code change to change things. So the best way is if you can provide a unified API to developers, they can just use this unified API, and then later if they want to switch models, providers, anything like that, you can just read the model name from an environment variable and no changes in the code base are needed. So this is at least something that we have seen being recommended in a lot of organizations, and we also highly recommend to do that so that we don't enter into vendor lock-ins. And especially in case of models, in case of infrastructure, it was still okay, but in case of models, there's such a rapid pace of changes, like newer models come out every single day. So that's why this becomes very, very important. Centralized key management is another problem that a gateway can help solve. So AWS, GCP, Azure, OpenAI all have different authentication mechanisms. So AWS kind of does it via the IAM role. GCP uses workload identity. OpenAI provides keys. So there is no, like, if you're using models from at least two providers, there is no way there is a single auth that will work for both. So then you have to always take a decision of whenever you're building an application that I'm using AWS, so let me do IAM role or access key secret key. And then if you want to switch to OpenAI, the whole authentication system basically changes. So that's why it's very important that you kind of unify the authentication across all these systems. And that's what kind of gateway helps solve that problem. The other advantage is that you ideally, especially in access to models, you don't want to give out like one key to an entire huge org or a team. Because then if anything goes wrong, it's very difficult to point out like which team member did it or what happened behind the scenes. And if you want to do user level attribution, that means you have to add all the users to your Azure account, AWS account, or OpenAI account. So this is why it's very important that you have this central layer to which you can add all the users. They can get their own API keys, and you can also issue like service accounts or virtual account keys for your applications. And then the key management from your gateway to the model is handled in a separate way. So you can rotate the keys, all of that you can do seamlessly. So that's why the centralized key management becomes very important, especially when you deal with large number of developers and models. Fallback and retries is another thing which Gateway can help enable. As Nikunj mentioned earlier, like there are downtimes of these models, And sometimes you also have constraints like certain models have rate limits, and if one model is running into rate limit constraints, you want to kind of fall back to the other model. So that actually becomes very easy from a central gateway layer. You can just tell the gateway that, hey, if my Azure model is running out of limits, please redirect to the OpenAI GPT-4 model. And this requires absolutely no code change on the application side. Like the application teams don't need to worry about this reliability issues, this rate limiting issues, and you can control it all from a central place. So this at least this we have seen a lot of our customers using this feature, and especially because of OpenAI going down. Like I think we saw the graph of OpenAI. Like almost every month there is a downtime of OpenAI of 30 minutes to 1 hour, and you don't want to like propagate the downtime to your users. Rate limit is another thing. Rate limiting is more like you want to limit the cost of the models on a per developer, per team, per application basis. And in some cases, you might want to limit it for your end customers also. Like we have had customers who kind of have a premium tier of their own customers and they want to give them a higher limit of LLM usage, and the rate limit the usage for their free freemium customers. So that can be used as a central rate limiting layer. So you can define things like rate limit this user per model limit. So you can do like rate limit this user to 1,000 requests per day. And just a funny incident here, like there was one time when this actually saved us internally also. Like there was this one agent that entered into an infinite loop that kept calling the model again and again and the tools again and again. And it ran over an entire weekend, but it could have run over an entire weekend, but because there was rate limit, it was stopped. So with this models is and agents, if your company is building agents, it's really easy to get into this infinite loop and it'll keep calling if the agent is not built properly. So it's very important to kind of impose these limits to not be surprised by exorbitant builds in a day or two. Load balancing is another thing, and especially like fallback that I mentioned earlier is more along the lines of that you are kind of defining that if Azure is down, then fall back to this model and things like that. Load balancing is a little bit more automated on the gateway side. So the gateway itself takes decisions on let me route to the fastest model. So you can configure policies that always route to the fastest model. So gateway will continue comparing like which models are the fastest ones, and it will keep routing to those models. It will also automatically detect that one model provider is down and let me shift the model traffic to another model. So this is the kind of intelligence that automatically is built in the gateway. In the future, gateways will also automatically start routing prompts to different models based on which one has the highest accuracy. It is still a bit early to do because these models are so rapidly changing, but once things become stabilized, it's easy to build that intelligence into the gateway. So if your prompt is simple, you might go to a smaller model, and if your prompt is complicated, you might go to a larger model. So that is another advantage that will happen because of the gateway. And a lot of our customers also use it for load balancing. So we have seen a lot of customers using for the Canary rollout. So whenever GPT-4 launches a new version, it's kind of risky to just switch to the new version as it is. So you usually start rolling out gradually, like 10% traffic rolls out, you compare the metrics, and then you roll out 20%, 30%. Guardrails is another feature that Gateway can provide. So this is good for adding guardrails which are kind of relevant for the whole company and which can be reusable. Application specific guardrails can stay with the application. They don't need to be like kept at the central gateway layer. But there are guardrails like PII removal, hate speech detection, these kind of guardrails, like every application team doesn't need to bother about it and they can just use a centralized guardrail server. So the way it kind of works is the application sends the request to the LLM gateway. The LLM gateway contacts the guardrail server that tells that, hey, is this prompt good to send to the LLM model? The guardrail server can either reply with, let's say, no, this is not a good prompt, and the LLM gateway can reject it, or it can mutate your prompt by removing the PII data and things like that. So if it can remove the PI data, then without the PI data, the prompt will go to the model, the response will come, and again the response will be tested with the guardrail server. That if something needs to be removed or invalidated, and based on that, the final response will go out to the application. So as an application developer, you really don't need to worry about all this flows behind the hood, how this will work. You can just call the gateway, and everything else is taken care of behind the hood. And in the future, if you want to upgrade your guardrail server, add a new guardrail, it becomes very easy, and it flows to all the application teams using it. Semantic caching is another thing, as pointed out by Nikunj earlier, that it can save you a lot of costs. Caching is already being added by a lot of the model providers directly. But if you want to have a unified layer and use your own cache, you can also add it at the gateway layer. So whenever a prompt comes, you can check if a similar prompt response is already there in the gateway. And if it is there, then the gateway can just return you the response. You don't need to like go to the model, which saves a lot of cost and latency in numerous use cases. So this is the kind of the scope of AI Gateway today. And if you're already using an AI Gateway product or something, anything along those lines, or we have built internally, pretty much these are some of the few of the features that we have already built internally. I want to go into a little bit about how gateways are going to evolve in the future. There are a lot of things advancing in the GenAI world, like the MCP A2A. I'm sure you have heard of these terms. So we do feel like the gateway's role is only going to increase in the future. Today it's only handling models. Tomorrow it's going to handle all these tools via MCP and also agents via the A2A protocol. So before I go into details of how the gateway is going to come into the picture, I just want to give a brief introduction of what an MCP server is, just to lay the background in case you're not familiar with it. So imagine that you have Slack as a product. So Slack will have different APIs. You can think of it like that. There will be an API to get the channels. There will be an API to get the messages in the channel. There will be an API to send the message. There will be an API to add the users. So there will be multiple APIs. You can think of it like that. When you build a Slack MCP server, you are kind of putting all these APIs in a discoverable format, which an LLM model can read and understand. So the moment you create a Slack MCP server, an external agent can now identify that, hey, these are the 5 functions available in Slack, and I can call them, and I know how to call them. So this is fundamentally what an MCP server is. It's just an API server transformed to become LLM compatible. There's not much more to it. And once you have a Slack MCP server, I just want to go into how an agent interacts with an MCP server. So the way it interacts is, like, say you have an MCP Slack server, the agent will go and ask MCP Slack that, hey, tell me all the tools that you have. So the agent is going to give you the Slack MCP server is going to give you those list of 5 tools that I mentioned earlier. And then the agent can decide that, hey, let's see if I ask a question like summarize all the Slack messages in the last 1 week. So the agent is going to then figure out that, hey, I need to call the tool get messages for my user ID. And then it's going to get all the messages, and then it's going to call another tool to summarize the messages. So if an LLM has access to all these tools like Slack 5 tools, summarization tool, so all of these things, then the LLM can automatically decide which order to call the tools and how to call the tools to finally give you the response. And this is why MCP servers become very important, because you can imagine that if every product in the world or every system in the world had the list of APIs exposed to you, and if there is a smart person that can automatically figure out all the APIs and decide how to coordinate the APIs to give you the final response, you can pretty much build any application that you want. So that's the beauty of MCP servers and why they are becoming so popular in the market today. So I'll now go into how a gateway kind of integrates with an MCP server. So this is what we feel like is the future that will coming, and we are already building parts of it in house, and which will be launching very, very soon. So the gateway has this access to these models, which we already had before, which we saw earlier, and you could access those models via the playground, via the CLI, or via your application. What is happening is the gateway will also have access to all the MCP servers inside the company. So if you're using, let's say, Gmail, AWS, Slack, Confluence, Jira, GitHub, or you can also build your own MCP servers. Let's say you have your Postgres database and you create an MCP server on top of the Postgres database, so you can add that. So now the gateway kind of knows about all the models inside the company and all the tools inside the company. And what this will enable in the future is you can basically just type this message on the playground or in your Slack or whatever interface you have, and a model will start doing the work for you. You literally don't need to write any code or understand anything. So you can type a message like get all my messages from Slack in the last 7 days, see if there are any tasks on me, and create tasks for each of them in Jira, which are assigned to me. So if you just type this, it's automatically going to figure out that, okay, there is a Slack MCP server in the company. I'm going to go and ask for Slack for the last 7 days of messages for this user. And this authorization is where this thing comes in that I pointed out before, the identity provider, which is whatever you're using, Okta, Azure AD, or whichever OIDC or SAML provider you're using. It's going to integrate with that. So when I ask this question, it's going to ask me to authenticate via my Okta account, and then it's going to get my Slack token and then get all my messages from Slack. The agent is automatically going to do it. It's going to probably parse all those messages to figure out which one point to a task. And then it's for each of those tasks, it's going to call a Jira API and create the task in Jira for me. So these things will become like realities that you can just type and it will start doing the work for you. The other advantage is you can start auto-generating code for a lot of the workflows in the company. So if you say like, I want to schedule something every week, that automatically analyzes my messages from Slack and creates a Jira ticket assigned to me. So it can automatically generate the code that does it for you because it knows how to call each of these APIs, tools, and in what order to call them. So those things will also become very, very easy, and it will kind of integrate with that authentication structure of your company. It's optimized for, because you will have a different Slack domain. You will have probably you'll have 5 AWS accounts. All of those are very, very tailored to your organization. Your GitHub might have a different like authentication system, like you might use Azure AD or something like that, but it will tailor it to your organization and then kind of create these agents within the company. Similarly, some few other examples I've given is analyze all the active alerts and try to figure out the PRs responsible for them. So in this case, it can try to talk to Datadog API, get all the active alerts from there, and then it's going to talk to GitHub APIs to figure out the change log on each of them, and then try to figure out if any of the PRs is responsible for them or not. So these kind of things will really become possible. And if you guys have already played with Cursor or any other MCP clients, you might have seen some glimpses of it. But these are mostly on the CLI or on your desktop. What we are trying is to kind of bring it to the browser so that you can actually execute all of them from your applications or from the playground or Slack or wherever you want them to. And the other advantage of having the gateway is basically like whoever is executing whatever inside the company, all these applications which are talking to these different tools, different MCP servers, different models, every single thing is audited, logged, and you can see the trace of every single thing happening inside the company at one place. This gives you the advantage of, again, enforcing guardrails, caching at every layer of the step, which will help you lower the cost or switch between one MCP server to the other without really the application developers knowing about it or having to change anything in their code. So that's a huge flexibility that you get and kind of prevents tying to any sort of vendor for models or MCPs or anything like that. So that's all from my side. This is a personalized session advisory, which I think Deepti, maybe you can elaborate a bit more on it.
Yeah, sure. So this is a giveaway for all the attendees of the webinar. So we've seen in the past, right? So because the AI landscape is evolving so fast, and we are fortunate to have a front row seat amongst all of this, right? So for all the attendees of this webinar, we are extending a personalized session plus 3 months 3 months access to the entire platform, and we'll go above and beyond. It's just not like free access to the platform. We'll go above and beyond with setting up working with you closely to set up the entire infrastructure, hand holding you to basically uh, give instructions on like how to set up your infrastructure, what sort of architecture will work for you, what sort of architecture will not work for you, and do a detailed POV with you. So if you are, we'll send the link in the chat box as well, but feel free to scan the QR code. Even if you don't want access, please scan the QR code, give your feedback. Would love to hear this. The team has worked really hard to basically work on this webinar, and yeah, so that'll be great.
Hi everyone. So please hold on. We'll be doing a demo of the overall system as well. And then post that, we'll share the link and we'll request folks to kind of fill the form. It will be a 1-minute thing before dropping off. So I'll request Abhishek if you can do the demo for everyone.
Yeah, so I'll share my screen. So based on the learnings that we have got from customers and how the AI landscape is evolving, we also have a gateway product that is used by multiple customers, and we just want to showcase a few of the things that we are doing, and there are a lot of more things to come. So this is the gateway product interface that we have. Yeah. So this is where you can kind of add all the models. As you can see that we support a bunch of providers, and if you don't see any provider that you're working with and you don't see it on the list, like it's really a small amount of effort for us to add. So so that can be added in no time. And these are all the different providers: AWS, GCP, OpenAI, Anthropic, Deep Infra. Custom is basically if you're self-hosting your own models, you can also bring them. So these are all the providers, and we also give you a full-fledged playground to kind of play with the models. So let's say you choose this model and so you can play with any of the models. You can see the code. This is the code that we kind of show you for calling the models. So you just get your API key from True Foundry and you just change the model name. The rest of the API remains the exact same for any single model that among this list that you're calling. So you don't have to change your code if you're switching models. We support different type of models like the chat models, embedding models, re-rank models. Real-time models are more like the voice, the audio and video models that have come up on OpenAI. So those are also supported. It also has first-class support for prompt management. So you can actually manage all the prompts. I'll just show you one example of a model that has basically guardrails selected on it. So 1 second. Yeah. So if you see like this is the name mentioned of the email and this thing, but if I type something, it's going to show me redacted. So because this gateway is integrated with the guardrail server, which I'll show you soon, any prompt that you send to the model is going to automatically remove all your PII details. So this is more on the guardrails thing. You can integrate the models, and then you can access all the metrics right here. So you'll be able to see which models are being called, what is the latency for each of these models, who is calling what the model, the time to first token, the inter-token latency. So this is another thing that is kind of very different in case of LLMs and why standard API gateways don't work. Because in traditional APIs, it always used to be the latency of the request. But in case of LLMs, latency of the request kind of doesn't matter because the longer your prompt, the more time it's going to take. So that's why the inter-token latency becomes very, very important, the time to first token. And every calculation of load balancing, rate limiting, everything is done based on tokens in case of gateway. So you can see all of that. You can also see like how many requests are being rate limited or fallback, load balanced or guardrails. So all of that you'll be able to see. And you can also see like how many requests were rate limited, what exactly happened in fallback, which rule was triggered and all of that. This will give you a complete picture of what is happening inside the company. You can also configure all of those rate limiting fallback configurations right here. So you can configure things like every developer has a rate limit of $20 per day. Or you can fall back to models when one model is not responding. You can do latency based routing, all of that I explained earlier. And the guardrails also you can do like, we come with like 2-3 like preset guardrails, but you can also bring your own guardrails and add to the system. So that also exists. And then for audit logging purposes, every single request that goes via the gateway is audit logged. It can be saved into your S3 bucket or wherever you want it to be saved. And then you can view all the request response and everything here so that it kind of helps in debugging. In the future, like MCP servers are also going to come here. So that is what we're working on. The list of MCP servers inside the company and all the example use cases that I mentioned, they will all be possible through the gateway itself. Yeah, so that's a big thing on the demo side. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Thanks everyone again for the session. We are still answering questions. In the meanwhile, there is a link to this form. As Deepti earlier mentioned, we are giving a session that is specifically private for any of the companies and the teams that are out here in terms of how the overall GenAI architecture looks like. Even if you are building it internally, how you should build as you kind of think about latency, guardrails, observability. And we are happy to do like a private session for your team. If you'd like that, please do fill the form. And we are giving 3 months access to a fully owned gateway within your VPC for full testing with full support from our side with onboarding as well as deployment. So again, we'll request everyone to fill the corresponding form before dropping off. And we really appreciate everyone taking the time to kind of stay in the webinar and listening to us. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Again, the post and the form link is in the webinar chat. I'm already seeing a lot of attendees that are replying to it. We'll request everyone to kind of reply. In the meanwhile, we'll be keeping on taking some questions that folks have posted along the way.
Yeah, you can also raise your hand if you want to ask some questions verbally. Happy to unmute you.
Deepti, Nitish has a question.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, hi, I am Nitish. I am currently working at Eightfold. So I have a question. We basically use open source gateway, and we face a challenge, and that is when we are trying to scale it beyond 450 RPS, it adds a lot of latency. So, like, is there any way we can improve on it, or you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, Nikhil, Abhishek, do you want to take that question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, Abhishek.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Abhishek, I can hear you.
Yeah. So the gateway is designed to be horizontally scalable. So the gateway will actually or horizontally auto scale based on the number of requests. At least I'm not sure which one you're using currently, but at least the gateway that we have benchmarked it to like 350 RPS on one CPU. So if you're talking about 450 RPS, it's pretty much just two CPUs that we need to handle that. So pretty much a single box can handle. We usually recommend to put three boxes if you're deploying it in one environment, so three replicas of it, but that should easily handle 450 RPS.
Thanks for the question. Again, everyone, I see a lot of folks filling this. This is a request from our side. We will be sending the presentations to you and we'll be sending the recording to you so that you can share with your team. In the meanwhile, the request is just to fill the form and we'll be taking in questions through the chat or the Q&A and we'll be answering them along the way. Sure. We have been getting a lot of requests from folks here. Nitish, thanks a lot. We'll definitely reach out to you. Thanks, Georgie. Thanks a lot, like Vishek, Aslam, folks from Synopsys that have filled the questionnaire. Thanks, Julakanti. Again, I'm keeping the link pinged in. Please feel free to fill in. In the meanwhile, if there are questions, we are still taking the questions along the way. Ali, if you can post a question on the chat, that will be helpful. Abhishek, we have a question from Kaushik. Can we set up latency costs goals, and then this centralized governance will audit and take care of the rest?
Yes, so you can export all the data from the metrics. You can export it to your own systems also, but you can also get a complete Excel sheet of latency, per team, per model, all of that. I guess that's what you're looking for to do a weekly audit. So you can export that on a per week basis and feed it into whatever systems you want.
So we have a question from Ali. What is the max size of input? I have a 500 MB dump. How can the model iterate through it? And Abhishek, if you can, turn on your video so that people can see while you're answering.
So, uh, so this is more of a question for the model than the gateway, to be honest. Like, I mean, you cannot do 500 MB. Most of the models will not be able to fit it in the context. But there are other systems like RAG and all that are designed to solve this problem. So the gateway is more like a proxy between your application and the model.
Yeah, I hope Ali that answers your questions. That answers your question. Parth is our HR here, who has jumped in the chat window. Yeah, and you can see how fast we are in terms of product as well as hiring. Parth has already sent you a connection request. Yeah, Abhishek, there's a follow-up question from Ali. Is there a working example of above?
Yeah, we can probably send you a RAG example offline, maybe. Yeah.
We don't see any open questions. All the questions we have tried to answer. If something has been missed, please do kind of post in the chat. We'll continue this for the next 5 minutes. And again, thanks a lot for everyone showing up. To this session, we'll follow up with the presentations as well as the recording of the session. And again, appreciate everyone filling the form as well as they leave. Hopefully, this was helpful to you to understand how the LLM gateways are becoming a central component, and look forward to kind of continuing and helping in any way we can to propel the GenAI ecosystem.
Yeah, there's one last question. Yeah, that's answered. Shiv Kumar, it's JavaScript. Okay. Probably I'll just wait for a minute more if there are any further questions, and then we can end the webinar.
Abhishek, you can touch on the framework for everyone as there was a question.
Yeah, so this is not built on Python. Python is like turns out to be way too slow for not a great choice for building proxies. So it uses the Ono framework that is the same framework that Cloudflare workers uses for at the edge. So it's super light, super fast, and that's why we chose this framework. In general, LLM, like we prefer, you have to kind of go between between Python or JavaScript kind of thing based frameworks, because a lot of the SDKs are designed for Python or JavaScript today. So that's why it's better. Like in Java and all, like a lot of the providers don't even provide support or problems dealing with that. So that's why.
So there's a question from Prasun. We have experienced that newer models are deviating from the standard API call structure. How rapidly are we planning to integrate those different structures to the LLM Gateway? Do we have an exhaustive documentation for different models and newer features like controlling thinking, multimodal inputs, etc.? Abhishek, you want to take that?
Yes, that is a great question. Indeed, like the newer models are, especially for keeping their own vendor lock-in, a lot of the providers are actually trying to introduce parameters that are not like OpenAI compatible and all. But so far, we have been able to manage everything within the OpenAI spec. If something comes that is really not fitting, it will go as a separate API, but we'll kind of at least make it pass through the gateway. So that is there, and we have documentation for all of the yes, for all of how to do multimodal and all of those things. But great question, and we are also like constantly working to kind of add support whenever something new comes. So within a day or two, like that support comes the moment if something adds, if some model adds another parameter or something like that. So it's a constant challenge, and that's why we realized like a lot of the companies were earlier kind of trying to build a gateway in-house, but the rate of changes is so high that it's very difficult to build and maintain it in-house, and that's how like we are also starting to see rapid adoption of something that is externally available.
Siv Kumaran has a question. How does this LLM gateway gets integrated with frameworks like LangChain, LangGraph for building agents? And Siv, just we were checking with others, so it seems it's fine the voice. So maybe you might want to once just unmute and mute yourself. Abhishek, you want to take the question?
Yeah. So, what is the question?
How does this LLM gateway integrate?
Understood. Yeah. So we actually show you the integration code. I think I didn't show it in the demo, but we show you the integration code, exact piece of how you integrate with LangChain, LangGraph, pretty much every framework that is out there. But the easy part with us is like we don't have a client SDK like most of the other products will have. So there it becomes a question. We actually just ask you to use the OpenAI client SDK, which kind of works with everything, or directly use the request API. So that makes it very, very easy for our gateway to get integrated into all these frameworks. Like you really don't need to do anything customer, even read our docs or anything like that. It shows up right in the UI what is the framework integration for each of them.
Soham has asked a question. Do you see Golang support coming up in the space lately? Abhishek?
So when you say Golang support, so yeah, I mean Golang support for this APIs, you mean like model APIs? Is that what you mean, or? So yeah.
We have unmuted you, so if you want to speak up, please feel free.
Soham, like basically like what kind of support are we talking about? We already have a Golang OpenAI library, and you can use that library to use the gateway. Basically, like since the gateway is OpenAI compatible, so you can use pretty much any LLM using OpenAI Go library and like access the models. Does it answer your question?
I think Soham is asking about what Abhishek was mentioning, like JavaScript, Python being generally used.
Yeah, you pretty much don't need, like if you're using the, I mean it depends on the model providers when they add the support, but if you're using the gateway, you will not have any issue calling it from Golang because it's a standard request API.
I think Soham got confused. So Soham, like the JavaScript Python Abhishek was mentioning, that was pretty much for the backend implementation of the gateway. So that should not really matter for the user as such. So currently, like it's just a matter of choice that like the gateway is written in what language. But yeah, it can pretty much be written in Golang also, and it will be as performant as like JavaScript one. There is no difference as such. Also.
There's a question from Prasun. We are planning to use features like context caching, tool support, etc. Apart from just calling LLMs, will this be available on the gateway, or will we have to use the model provider's SDK to do this? Abhishek, you want to kind of answer this?
Yeah, so most of it is already available in the gateway. So you should be able to use this context caching or even the tool support already. If something is not available, like happy to just integrate it. But a lot of our customers are using it and it's already available.
Okay, thank you everyone. We are at the end of the hour. We really appreciate everyone joining in. Again, last request, if you all can fill in the form before dropping in. We'll be closing this webinar in the next 2 minutes. Thanks a lot, everyone, again. Feel free to drop off and we'll request you filling in the form.